Asbestos is a known carcinogen, and there's no safe level of exposure.
Mesothelioma is a miserable disease.
They must fight a truly global battle.
We want to demonstrate our enormous respect.
Keep up the good work. I look forward to the day when ADAO is no longer needed.
Fix it. Fix it. Everything in the world can be fixed.
Keep me in your heart for a while.
Well, good afternoon. Great lunch, eh? I know from my aging parents and other people in this room for other reasons know that when it comes to health care, there is no thing that we have to learn better and no thing we have to get better at than being our own advocate. And the same thing is true when it comes time to protect the people that we love from non-occupational exposures to asbestos when in the buildings we occupy or work that we do in our own homes may wind up becoming a place where asbestos might be accidentally disturbed or where it might be purposefully disturbed for a renovation or a demolition project. And so my task today chosen is to try to deliver to us action steps that as advocates we can take. But not just that we can take. When we have a moment in our life like many people in this room have had, and we have friends that care for us and people that we never knew before in our community, they always come up to us and the key thing they say is there anything I can do? Or what can I do to help? Or if you need something, just call me. So the spirit of this presentation also is to say, yes, there are things you can do. And to make the presentation available, anybody who wants the presentation, they're free to use it on their own. Just have to send me an email, very simple email address. The company name is Mystic Air Quality Consultants. So it's MAQC, the number 3, at AOL.com. And I will send it to you, no rights withheld. You can use it in your communities as you would like. So where are we going to take these action steps? They can't just come out of nowhere. So the action steps that I'm going to recommend come out of the regulatory frameworks from EPA, OSHA, and state or local laws that exist that people who are doing renovations or people who are controlling buildings that we and our loved ones occupy are already supposed to be following. So we'll start with the EPA. The EPA in the United States has a program that's about 20 or some years old. It goes conveniently in the public discussion as a HERA. So the building blocks of this on the bottom are a HERA. The program itself requires that in grades K to 12 school buildings that there are inspections done to find accessible building materials. They're inventoried, where they are, how much there are there, and what condition that they're in, so that they can be protective in good ongoing management. To do that management, two things happen. By law, the local school district has to pick a person, this is going to be called a designated person, to oversee this program. Private schools as well as public schools, and they also have to have some kind of a written document, which is called an asbestos management plan. Absolutely core, basic, essential. So our advocacy in our communities, let's get to know that designated person and let's make sure they've got a management plan. In that management plan, they are going to be following a protocol of looking every 6 months at the materials that have been identified and every 3 years to re-inspect the buildings to keep the materials in good repair. And to keep them in good repair, they would include repairing damaged materials. If you live in a community that the EPA has designated an environmental justice community or a distressed municipality, the Enforcement Bureau of the EPA, which is not the one threatened with being closed up for budget cuts, We'll make sure that that community doesn't take money away from protecting school kids under this environmental justice initiative. So we should make sure that we support the local school district, their efforts to train their employees, and to hire contractors who are either going to repair or remove these materials. And when the critical time to do that is budget time, we have to make sure those line items don't get whacked out of the budget. And also to make sure that that designated person in the school district keeps accurate records of work that's been done. Any kind of program under the EPA school program where these activities are going to take part of a capital improvement project. Usually in your community, these are going to be overseen by a school building committee. These are people very interested in the community, but they typically do not have any background in the asbestos management program at the school. So it's very important to advocate when a school building committee is being put together to make sure people that are knowledgeable about the asbestos are represented at least by one person on those items, on those community building committees, both at the time budgets are being prepared, not when they're done, when they're being prepared, and when bonding is being done for the projects. And to verify through that building committee that only properly trained and licensed contractors are hired to do that work. When you get away from the schools, the program that Brent was talking about, the NESHAPS program, so outside of our communities, public buildings, any buildings that are less than 4 dwelling units, that are more than 4 dwelling units, these also have to go through all the requirements that Brent already mentioned. Our advocacy, our arrow for this particular item is to make sure that we hold property management companies, our own local building code officials, and any companies that get contracts from our municipalities, hold them to following these rules. And if we drive around projects and there's a lot of dust from the projects or a seemingly uncontrolled amount of activity, then that's the time to call the local building officials. Also, all across the country, there are industries, whether they were mining industries or whether they were production facilities, where historically asbestos has been used to blend and make products. One of the things that's done in the largesse of the community well-being for these companies is to take their waste and to donate it for clean fill. I never met the guy. Okay. But clean fill is out there. In Nashua, New Hampshire, there's 450 places where asbestos waste has been put on the ground, covered up by 2 inches of soil or dirt on people's property where they live. And you go on the website for the district and you find that to get a building permit to put in a garage or a swimming pool or a driveway, they can't do it because it's going to disturb asbestos. So the action step here is find out what kind of industries, by looking at building records, permits for industrial procedures, have been done in your town, in your municipalities, and make sure that they have not thrown this waste away. It affects property values, it hurts people in their homes as well as in their health. Those same rules require all waste from jobs that are municipality driven, that are renovation projects, or that are industrial projects, that the waste is sent away properly. If it's not, this could come back to the community to harm the community that you live in, its reputation, and also its pocketbook, because they could have severe fines. OSHA has worked over the years to limit the amount of asbestos in the air that anybody who is an employee, not just the abatement people. Anybody that's an employee is legally able to be exposed to. Now, these levels, too long of a discussion for today, are not even protective of health, but they're at least a regulatory threshold. And so our action step is to make sure that we never allow ourselves or our loved ones or anybody working in a facility where ourselves or our loved ones are going to occupy the space after they've done the work to perform work at levels that are above these occupational levels without the proper controls for the environmental air in the building and for the workers' health themselves. And also, for those of us that are business people, to never hire anybody and let them do that. When those levels are higher, OSHA has procedures, engineering controls, wet methods, they're called, and then personal protective equipment. Anybody that has a loved one that works in occupations around building materials should make sure they're protected and that they have been trained to use these. And I'm not only referring to asbestos abatement. This also goes for people who polish and clean floors that are asbestos. There is a combination of 5 items that are done during asbestos abatements in buildings that you might occupy. They're not always covered by local laws. So this slide has them all. The next couple are pictures of them. So there should be a protection, separation of the room where the work's being done from the outside environment and from the rest of the building, particularly if you're occupying the other part of the building, because it's legal to do these tasks while other people are still in the building. They're supposed to use polyethylene sheeting, plastic, to first turn off the air conditioning, the heating, ventilation system, then cover up any of the vents, cover up any openings to the outside, use plastic draping on the walls and the floors if the work is above. And then, as you see in the top picture here, to actually build an entry system. And when they come out of that area, the workers are supposed to shower out, not carry out any contamination with them. So if you're working in a building and there's work going on next to where you do your job, and it's an asbestos abatement job, and these controls aren't in place, it's time to raise your voice. In addition, there is some ventilation that will be going on. So here's some machines, like the one in the bottom picture. These are basically very simple machines. They have filters in them and they have fans in them. And they suck in the air from the room, put it through a filter, and then put it out the window like you see in the picture. That creates a negative pressure or a vacuum in the room. So when you and I are in the other side doing our regular business, any exchange of air from this work area to where we are is always going to be our air going in there, not their air coming out to where I am. So you want to make sure they're using that. They also will use special vacuum cleaners to pick up after themselves so there isn't any waste that's left behind. Now, there are some discretionary things I would recommend. And this is a picture from a website from, that we saw before from Andy Alberta. This demonstrates that before projects are done in your community or in the school that you pay tax money for, there should be a mandatory requirement that people who are going to bid to do the work show up and see the job. It can't be mailing these bids in from far away. They will underbid the job. When they get to the job, they will not do the work properly because they didn't budget for it properly. Even all the government agencies that we work for at Mystic Air Quality, they say, oh, we have to take the lowest bid. They don't have to take the lowest bid. They have to take the lowest qualified bid. And you can state the qualifications in the documentation for the work. It's not regulatory, it's contractual, and it has the power to stand up in court. In addition to having these requirements to see the job before you bid on the job, it's important that all in-house employees know, for their protection, when the job's going to start, what particular parts of the building they shouldn't go to, and how they can protect themselves when they're working in the building during the work. My talk doesn't get into using microscopes, except to just tell you that any of the work done on these buildings is going to require microscope analysis of the building materials before and air samples after. Although the legal requirement is more than 1% asbestos, it's very important to recognize some building materials have asbestos in them at a smaller amount. These are the types. You should protect yourself from them. You want to be careful. I guess I did a lot of slides there. You want to be careful when you're doing do-it-yourself projects. Don't let yourself be harmed by things that you do by yourself. And this would include a variety of materials at home. And the list was, maybe you saw it and I didn't. Thank you.
Keep up the good work. I look forward to the day when ADAO is no longer needed.
Fix it. Fix it. Everything in the world can be fixed.
Your heart for a while.